This podcast is brought to you by the Moonflower Path Community Space, an online somatic self-care studio that offers highly sensitive, creative, and earth-loving souls a cozy space to honor and nourish their unique gifts through somatic self-care practices and earth-based rituals. In a world that is consistently trying to convince you not to trust yourself, that you aren't worthy of care, that you need to be loud and fast to fit in, and that you are separate from the earth, we here at the Moonflower Path believe that it is a radical act to not only care for ourselves, but to deeply care for each other and for the earth in the process. By becoming a Moonflower member, you will gain access to a wide array of weekly, cozy, and accessible live stream yoga classes, a library of self-care resources so you can always have a space to feel held, monthly seasonal rituals and gatherings, and be part of a community of folks like you, all walking along an intentional journey of radical self-care. We offer pay what you can options to anyone who asks, whether you are from the LGBTQIA2S+ community, the BIPOC community, or are struggling with funds right now, you are welcome here. Plus, for every purchase you make with the Moonflower Path, we donate $1 to an Indigenous-run charity so you can know that your purchase directly goes towards reconciliation with the earth and its original caretakers. Join today for as low as $88 Canadian by visiting our website, themoonflowerpath.com. Do you ever find yourself along your self-care journey asking yourself, wait, I thought I didn't struggle with this anymore? Yeah, me too. And that Moonflower is one of the helpful and humbling things I learned this past summer during our 2-month break. So I'm here to share with you some of the lessons I learned along my self-care journey and some gentle guidance on how you can continue to support yourself along the ups and downs of your self-care journey. Welcome to Season 2 of the Moonflower Path podcast. If you're new in these parts, it's so lovely to have you here. Welcome. Hello, hello. If you are a regular listener, welcome back. I am so honored and grateful to be here with all of you, back in this chair, sitting with you. A little bit of a change. If you are watching this on YouTube, you will notice that this is actually a video. I do have a script in front of me, so you'll see my eyes kind of shift up and down. But I don't know, I just kind of wanted to change things up. Maybe we'll stick with this, maybe we won't. Just thought it might be nice to show my face, but if you're listening on whatever podcast app that you're listening to, then that's great. Welcome wherever and however you are listening in or watching in. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Moonflower Path podcast. This space is for the highly sensitive, the creatives, the earth-loving, the caregivers, the weirdos, the feelers, the change makers, and dreamers of the world. Here, we are all about guiding you to trust your body intuition so you can find home and shift culture. Through the exploration of somatic practice, self-care, and seasonal ritual, my hope is that you will be inspired to be in harmony with yourself and in a dance with the earth. I'm your host, Carolyn, and I'm so honored and grateful to be here with you today. So I wanted this first episode of Season 2 to be kind of like let's actually check in a little bit when it comes to how your summer was, how my summer was, reflect back a little bit before we bring this season to a close. Not the season of the podcast, the season like the summer season to a close, and before fall comes in a couple of weeks, because it is the beginning of September. So I wanted to share a little bit about how my summer went and use that as a way to offer you a little bit of support on your self-care journey. So firstly, I'd like to explain, what do I actually mean by self-care journey? If you've been around in these parts for a little while, you've heard me actually use that terminology, and I thought it might be helpful for me to explain it a little bit. Well, For some, it might be referred to as your healing journey. So that might be a terminology or wording that you might be familiar with. Kind of like that timeline where you began to notice in your life that there were some things about the way you moved through the world that just didn't quite feel right anymore. Whether that be that it came on as like a slow burn, so repeated toxic patterns in relationships, noticing that you were just generally unhappy, a slow realization that you were at war with your body or not treating your body in the way that you actually wanted to, or waking up to the reality that you enact unhelpful avoidance habits that just aren't supporting your ultimate joy. And okay, hang on. I feel like at this point I should also be very clear. I'm not a therapist, and I am talking about some things that might kind of blur the lines of things that you would explore within therapy. But what I am is a certified yoga teacher and very knowledgeable about the body and the way that our body communicates with us as a means of being able to live a life that feels more in line with what it is that we want and we need. So please know that I'm not offering any advice as a certified therapist. I'm not even really offering a lot of advice. I'm offering more my experience and talking really within my scope and my area of permission, which is self-care. It's somatic self-care. So I just wanted to say that. But you might also notice that it more kind of comes on as a big moment. So that might be periods of burnout, periods of grief, a breakdown, so to speak, or a wake-up call. Now, maybe that moment is way back in time. Maybe you're like, oh yeah, I can super duper pinpoint that moment when that happened. Or maybe it's quite recent, or maybe you're right in the thick of it. And how do you know what that moment is? Well, it's usually when you begin to notice your body is trying to tell you something, or maybe your mind is trying to tell you something, but in my experience, it's my body, and most of the folks that I work with and that I support and I hold space for, it's something that's noticed within the body, especially folks that are highly sensitive and folks that are creative. But it might be seen as super low or super high, like unhelpfully high energy, pain in the body, foggy brain, shaking in the body, etc. Lots of different ways. So from that moment on, when you begin to say, hang on, something doesn't feel quite right, and I think I want things to feel different, maybe better, whatever that may mean for you. That is the beginning of your self-care journey. It's the moment you decide. It's the moment you begin to choose you. It's the moment you begin to believe in something better. It's the moment you begin to find yourself. It's the moment you begin to desire instead of just doing things the way you've been told you have to or that you should. And as beautiful as that moment might sound, you know it's not so beautiful when you're in it. You know that. It usually sucks. But it's the decision you make from that moment forward that begins to guide you on a path back to yourself in the most magical way. And again, the road is windy and messy and beautiful and empowering and many other things. So there might be moments where you feel freaking fantastic and so freaking proud. Yes, I said no to that thing. Yes, I finally carved out time for that thing. Yes, I asked for help. Yes, I invested in that support I know I wanted. In those moments, I do hope that you've taken time in celebrating yourself. Now, one thing that I've noticed along my self-care journey is the impactful benefit of cyclical living, which you've heard me talk about surrounding lunar living and seasonal living. At the beginning, it's all just learning, taking in information, noticing what phases are found in a cycle, and noticing and recognizing the similarities in yourself, in your body. And there's cycles on cycles. I notice personally that in the winter, I usually feel my best. Or during a certain period in my menstrual cycle, I feel my most down. And so there's like some energetics in that. There's also just some like patterns and cycles, but there's also some like hormones and some actual physical things that are happening in your body. And it's just like a layering and an exploration of like, oh wow, all of these patterns and cycles that I move through. It's quite interesting. It's about gathering and noticing the ways that my body naturally feels through her own cycles, or noticing the ways that my body naturally responds to different situations. And instead of shaming her, instead getting curious about what those reactions, whether they be emotions or physical sensations like tiredness or brain fogginess or senses of overwhelm, or the other end of the spectrum, sensations of calm, joy, ease, right? Noticing both ends, like what brings me joy, what makes my body feel light and beautiful and full and energized, and where have I noticed, when do I notice my body feeling the opposite of those things, or something in between, like where do I feel neutral, right? It's just like it's a lot of questions, and it's a lot of curiosity, which can be really fun and can be really nice tool to use, especially if you're somebody who is creative, because creatives really thrive on curiosity. And then it's a matter of offering those parts of myself, those parts of yourself, what they might want and need in those moments. That's the self-care journey. It ebbs and it flows as you ebb and flow. It's about not shaming the way that you are, just by flowing with it and carving out a life and a self-care support system that feels like you can just be you. So within that process of noticing and recognizing and supporting, it begins to feel great, right? It begins to feel pretty darn awesome at times. But here's the moment that feels weird. The moment where you thought you had figured some shit out and fell back into the darkness that you are now familiar with, but now looks a little different. What do you do then? Are you back at square one? Are you not actually healed or cured from that thing you thought you had overcome? Whether that be anxiety, depression, grief, burnout, whatever, there's lots of different things that you might associate or label darkness as. But before I go on and offer you an example from my own life, I'd like to make it clear, yes, you have actually partly overcome that thing. Yes, you have partly healed from or cured that thing. You can be healed from something and healing at the same time. There are ways to support yourself and to still feel proud of the growth that you've made. And I think that when we get to the end of this episode, you will probably not actually have learned something new. You will think to yourself, oh yeah, okay, this makes sense. And I think I knew this already. I just needed to remember. And that's okay. I'm okay with being the one to help remind you of what you already know deep inside. Hello, gentle listener. Carolyn here, interrupting today's episode to tell you about our new free resource called In Tune with the Moon. Learn to listen to, trust in, and honor your body intuition so you can feel empowered to take up space in your life with the moon by your side every step of the way. This free resource includes digital moon phase calendars. So that's pretty phone wallpapers and widgets that have a moon phase calendar on them from now until the end of the year, and they'll be updated in the new year. 4 lunar ritual videos that are about 30 minutes in length and always follow the same comforting ritual of some gentle yoga, some meditation, and some lunar inspired journal prompts. And yes, these are cozy and accessible. All bodies, all mobility levels are very much welcome. And a digital lunar journal to deepen your relationship with yourself and the moon. By downloading this resource, you'll also begin to receive our monthly Moonflower Journal, filled with cozy and seasonal self-care resources. Have I mentioned that it's all for free? Get in tune with the moon as well as with yourself by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting our website, themoonflowerpath.com. Now, let me offer you an example from my own life. At the end of season 1, I shared in 2 separate episodes my experiences in summers past and how I've learned to support myself through all of that. And I've had a few summers in particular that just have generally felt super challenging. And when sharing in those episodes, I was talking very much in past tense terms. And real talk, if there's one word I would use to refer to this past summer that I just moved through, it is humbled. So walking into the summer, I was all like, I got this. This summer is going to be great. I've set up my life such that all my self-care is set in place. I've got my morning ritual in place, my healthy amount, for me of work hours laid out. I've even made the decision to pause the podcast and step away from social media for the summer. Nothing can get me. I'm going to have the smoothest summer. Well, that was a big LOL to that. I ended up having to take an emergency week off from running the online community space because I felt so overwhelmed and drained. It was from a few different external situations, and I'm not really trying or needing or wanting to use this podcast as like a personal diary. I'm more so pulling from my own experience because that is the best space that I can speak from, and I know that I really like hearing about other people's personal experience. That's how we learn, that's how we grow with each other. So it was from a few different external situations, but it was also just my body. I haven't been quiet about my journey with depression. And once again, because I find it helpful to personify my internal experience, came to hang out with me this summer. So I took some time off. And at first, I honestly, like at the very, very beginning, it felt like a massive failure. I am somebody who likes to plan things out. And so it was very much like I had planned out the pauses. I had planned out the carving out of the space. I had taken a pause from the podcast. I had stepped away from social media. I am very, very clear in the amount of work hours that I dedicate my time and my energy to. And we had planned camping weekends. And I am very much I've planned the things. I've done the things so that everything is going to be fine. I'm in control. So at first it felt like a failure. I felt ashamed that me, the one who stands on pedestals and speaks so loudly about not only folks' worthiness of caring for themselves, but also about the benefits of self-care and about prioritizing it, making time for it. And I really had. But don't worry. That period didn't last very long. I wasn't right back at the beginning of my self-care journey. This is the journey. This is the path of being a moonflower. Just because you've done the therapy, just because you've maybe started taking the medication, just because you've maybe signed up for that online somatic self-care membership, wink, wink. The Moonflower Path community space is literally created out of a need that I know there is for folks to have a space that they can continually nurture their self-care and nurture themselves. But just because you've got your health and fitness regime set and it's fire, just because you've got a beautiful flow of earth-based rituals going, just because you've maybe changed careers for your dream job or left that relationship or moved locations or rediscovered your love for creativity, doesn't mean the darkness won't come back. It's going to come back. Now you might be thinking, well, that's not very encouraging, Carolyn. What's the freaking point then? Don't worry, I'm getting to that. But first, I'd like to point out, if this is a realization right now and you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, how foolish of me that I even thought that I thought that I made all these changes and now I'm good. Things are going to be smooth here on out. I'd like to say it's not your fault. Let me say that again. It's not your fault. We are fed this storyline, this narrative, time and time again in the culture that we live in. The movies we watch always have a hero's journey with a happy ending where they overcome this thing, and then the end of the movie is where they're good. They've figured it out. They're now good. Or even if we think of a storyline of marriage, that marriage is seen as the end point. And then it's okay, once you get married, you will now be continually happy and everything is good. And we know that's not real. That's not the reality. Or once you graduate, right? You're okay. Or once you get that job, okay, awesome. Now I'm good. Now I will feel fulfilled. Now I will never struggle with that thing ever again. We're told that the only way to live is linear. Once you've mastered that thing, you'll move on to the next and never deal with that issue ever again. We love a good burning ritual or job quitting or breakthrough story. It's the linear versus the cyclical living battle once again. So it's not your fault. It's not our fault that we think that once we finally do that thing, we'll finally be happy and all will be well. Once we finally buy that product, once we finally do that thing, go through that course, whatever. It's what we're told to believe. But the feeling of failure, when that's not always the case, sucks really bad. Now, the opposite isn't the reality either, right? So you would think that the opposite would be like, okay, so we just like always loop through the same situations and same challenges all the time over and over again, and just like nothing ever changes. And this is where I begin to get a bit less gloom and doom within this episode. Okay, so let's turn to the natural world as a teacher once again, right? You've heard me say before, nature is cyclical and you are nature. And that's something I touched on at the beginning of this episode, right? That we begin to notice patterns in our body and how our body feels at different moments and how to support our body in that turning of the wheel. But it's actually what I've noticed, and also there are like many other folks in the world that say this, that it's actually richer than that. It's a little bit more vast and complex than that. Nature moves in spirals. You know that. I'm sure you've heard of the Fibonacci series and how we can find this evidence of spiral growth in many places in the natural world. The pattern of sunflower seeds, the growth of a seashell. That's what we pull from as encouragement in this self-care journey. So let me bring it back to my example from earlier, my relationship with the summer. As much as it might have felt like I had fallen back into the same dark place I had become so familiar with, but didn't really want to be back in again, this time I knew better. I had grown. I had healed in many ways. I was able to remove myself slightly from the depths of the darkness and instead of feel it swallow me whole, to look at it right in the eye and say, welcome back, old friend. What do you need this time around? Like that Simon and Garfunkel song, The Sound of Silence. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I have come to talk to you again. That is progress. That is healing. That is growth. It's not failure. So yeah, maybe my life has drastically changed in so many beautiful ways. But I haven't changed my life because the changes were now going to ensure that the shit wouldn't come back. It's been changed to leave space for when it does come back, I can navigate it. I can take the time off. I can go back to therapy. I can double down on my self-care tools or try new ones. Now, okay, privilege pause here. I recognize the privilege that I hold in being able to take a random week off of work. And I'd like to recognize that if you're not in a place to be able to do that, first, I see you and I send you so much love. Second, what could you do? Would creating space for you look like simply turning to a friend and asking for help? Creating space for the ebbs in our self-care journey can look many different ways. But I also would like to recognize the privilege that I hold and say that I see you and I'm sending you so much love if that's not a space that you find yourself in at this time. Okay, back to the words that I got here in front of my face. So this is the reality. This is the truth. At least it's my truth. I had originally wanted to call this episode, Yes, You Can Be Healed and Healing at the Same Time, because that's the thing that my wife and I kind of joke about in our own, quote, healing journeys. It's a joke because we know it ain't true. Like, oh man, I feel really anxious again. Damn, I thought I was cured from that. No, that's not how it works. But it kind of is also at the same time. You're never back at square one. One of the things you've learned or may still be learning is perspective. Once you recognize that you are someone who moves through periods of darkness, they seem to have less of a grip on you, right? Once you label that thing, once you look at that thing right in the eye, it seems to less hold on to you and you can begin to unravel and untangle yourself from it. And the process of doing that becomes easier and easier as you go through it. And that, Moonflower, is huge. It is huge. So, at the beginning of this episode, I said that I'd share some gentle guidance on how you can navigate the ups and downs on your self-care journey, because we now know it's lifelong. It's going to change as you do, as you come up against new and familiar struggles, right? New ones that you've never seen before and ones that you're like, okay, you again. And I laugh because, I mean, like, you either laugh or you cry, right? Not that one is better than the other, but sometimes we have to laugh at the darkness because otherwise, oh my goodness. So, so that's the beauty of the path. It's the ability to intuitively flow with those struggles. And that's going to grow. That ability is going to grow. That's why it's called a self-care practice. That's called resilience, Moonflower. It's called becoming resilient. And to build resilience as the sensitive soul that you are is such a superpower, because that darkness is also your superpower. It sure as heck is mine. It gives me a unique perspective to be able to sit here and talk to you on the other side of a super challenging summer and say, I made it through and you can too. So let's get into the gentle guidance. Number 1, remember you're not back at square one. You're not a failure if you have to go, oh, hang on, I can't really do a whole lot right now because I'm dealing with a whole lot inside. You're not back at square one. You're not a failure when you move through yet another panic attack, when you can't get out of bed, when you feel overwhelmed with anxiety, when you feel bogged down or weighed down with grief or sorrow from a thing that's happening in your life or from the world at whole. You know better this time around. You are a cyclical, spiral, seasonal, ever-changing human being. You are a human being that is just being a human. And this is just a season, a temporary moment where you get to listen more closely to your darkness and get to know it, or her, or them, or he, a little bit more intimately. Number 2, find a community. We don't heal alone, darling. Whether that be a paid membership or just a close friend, we aren't meant to go through the hard stuff alone. Number 3, let your self-care toolkit change. One thing that I realized this summer was that the self-care supports I had put into place just weren't working for me, right? Again, it was this like, I got it all figured out. I'm in control. I've got a plan. And then the plan wasn't working. So let the plan change. I found myself in that week off thinking to myself, what the heck? I've been doing the same things I usually do, but it's not working. And that's okay. They just had to change. That's one of the things that my body was trying to tell me. I'm going to guide you and talk more about this point, this number 3 point, in an upcoming podcast episode, and a little bit more in the membership, in the community space. There's going to be a workshop coming up in the fall that I'm going to be guiding folks through, and I really hope that you join us in that. More information on that to come. But if you're like, I don't really know how to re-examine or recalibrate within my self-care journey, no worries, my friend. I've got some supports coming out around that. But for now, let this be maybe the seed planting of just the knowledge that your self-care supports can change. That's just that's part of it. And I hope that you know that, especially now at the beginning of September where fall is coming. I love, it's like that back to school energy when you're like, all right, let's change things up. Let's have a little bit more of a fresh perspective. Because it needs to be able to change and ebb and flow. And I believe that as folks that are really in tune with our intuition, that we find that probably we need for it to change a bit more than we might believe and think. And number 4, and this is my favorite point, and it's less like guidance and more just like a reminder. And this is one that's been very freeing for me, especially as somebody who is in the position that I am within this business and within this community and in this podcast, is that you can be broken and whole at the same time. We might think, oh no, I'm back in a period of darkness, struggle, challenge. Am I now a fraud, right? Good old imposter syndrome. We have to be experts on things to be able to speak about them, right? No, you don't. That's not the whole truth. Just like me sitting in this chair, literally telling you I kind of fell apart just a few months ago, I'm also sitting in this chair offering you guidance on how to not fall completely apart, or at least how to support yourself when you do. Might seem ironic, but I think it's beautiful. I might be, quote, on the other side of my challenging season, but I'm not too far ahead that I can't turn around, grab your hand, look into your eyes and say, I know this sucks. I know, but it's okay. I know life is hard, but I also know that you got this. So if you're a parent or a coach or a leader in your career or just a friend who sometimes offers other friends support, you still can. But the thing is that we don't want to just be blindly offering each other advice, right? Because we don't know what other people need. So I think that instead, by moving through periods of darkness, it allows us to better be able to empathize with others and hold space for each other in our collective periods of challenge and darkness. That's the beauty of this whole let's be broken and whole together thing. All right, Moonflower, that's what I've got for you today. I know this might have felt like a heavy topic to start season 2 off with, but I wanted it to also be an encouraging one, an episode to set the tone here. You are not defined by your darkness. You are defined by your ability to dance through the dark. P.S. If you want a phone wallpaper with that on it, click the link in the show notes to get one for free. If you're still at the beginning of your self-care journey, I'd like to gently invite you to download our new and free resource called In Tune with the Moon, which was mentioned earlier in this episode. It's the ritual and support that deeply helped me at the beginning of my own self-care journey, and it's one we still move through together in the Moonflower Path community space every Thursday. And I hope that this free version of this magical ritual serves you well. Get access to it by visiting the link in the show notes or visiting our website, themoonflowerpath.com. Thank you for being here. I've got a great second season for you with lots more interviews with special guests to come and just a lot more wonderful, cozy, somatic self-care stuff. So share this episode with a friend who you think would appreciate the reminder that they're doing a beautiful job on their own self-care journey. And I look forward to connecting with you again very soon. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Moonflower Path podcast. I'm your host, Carolyn, and ways that you can find more support from me and this cozy community are all found in the show notes. Please consider rating, reviewing, and sharing this podcast with a friend. Those are the best ways to show your support for this free and accessible resource. Wishing you a gentle rest of your day, and I look forward to connecting again with you very soon.